Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Classroom, where we consider something from the Philosopher's Show in a more academic way. This time, we're talking about the problem of material constitution. I'm going to have a couple of episodes on this just explaining the thing, because we're not actually going to get into different ideas about like what you can actually do, or what different possibilities of how you can actually answer this question this week. Possibly the following week, I don't know, possibly some weeks later or something like that, we'll start asking those questions. So today I'm really just going to give you the more academic view of this problem, specifically the ship of Theseus. In this video I'll talk about just the problem of material constitution in general, and the stuff that I'm going to be giving you comes out specifically of a book called Aquinas and the Ship of Theseus by Christopher Brown. Unfortunately, I mean, at the time that if you're interested in it, at the time that you're looking for it, I don't know what it's going to be like, but right now it's going for a buttload, like once 100 and something over in Amazon, because there's not very many left. It's an academic book. If you are around a university library, especially if you're around, one of the bigs, typically they have a lot of books that you can go, and you can just go and check them out. I know at UC Irvine, it costs 80 bones to get one of their library cards, which sucks, but I mean, it's worth it rather than, that $80 is going to save you the $100 and some dollars that, that you could have spent on this book. As long as, you just check out that one book. I don't even know if they have it. I'm just saying that it would. But I'll put a link in the description anyway if you want to get that book. All right, so to the specific problem. Our first question is, which is numerically identical to the original ship? All right, we have you heard it in the Philosopher's Show, the ship of Theseus. That's what we're really looking at right now. Is like when we have those two ships, the one that has had every plank replaced, and the other one that is all the original planks. Which one of those is the original ship? By the way, I said that this problem came in Plutarch, but the twist on it that somebody rebuilds it comes from Thomas Hobbes, who comes much later in the history of philosophy, and very well known for social contract theory, and had a lot of intellectual influence on our founding fathers in the United States. So yeah, he's kind of his big book was Leviathan. I don't know if that's important to you guys, but all right, problem of material constitution. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set out 6 premises, 6 things that we could say we claim about the world that everybody seems to believe intuitively. And by intuitively, again, I don't mean like woman's intuition, right? What I mean is something that it seems like we just directly see, right? It seems like I don't have any. Not that I need to prove this is something that I'm looking directly at and I'm saying, this has got to be the case, right? Like 1 + 1 = 2. You could prove that, but more likely you just look at it and say, yeah, you have 1, you have 1, 2 is just those 1 and 1. What else is there, right? So these are intuitions about material objects. Again, I'm getting this out of that book, right? And what I like about that book is it sets it all out very neatly, and that's why I'm relying heavily on it. So these are intuitions about material objects. Material objects just mean objects made out of matter. So things that we think that we know directly about material objects. Number 1, it seems like there are compound material objects, right? In other words, it seems like there are material objects made out of stuff, out of matter, that are put together, right? Like, that are more than just one little piece of matter, but they're like combined pieces of matter, right? Compound, not, I don't know, I can't think of what the singular term would be. Simple, maybe. Simple material objects, but compound material objects. Number 2, it seems like there are many, many kinds of compound material objects, right? It seems like there are surfboards and buses and people and plants, right? And those all seem to be material objects that are, objects made up of stuff and compound, right? Made out of lots of different parts. and yet they are different kinds of compound material objects. This we could call ontological pluralism. It does in the book. You don't need to worry about what that means. If you really care, ontological just means metaphysical, like a study of being, study of the way things are, how things exist, and pluralism meaning, plural obviously meaning more than one. There are more than one things, right? There are more than one kinds of beings, material beings. Number 3, compound material objects endure through time and change. What that means is, it seems like you can have a compound material object, let's say you, right? You sitting in your chair right now, and you exist at moment 1 and moment 2. It seems like you could still exist even though it's now a new moment. Or let's say you stand up. It seems like you could persist through that change, right? It seems like you existed as a sitting person, and now you exist as a standing person. So it seems like compound material objects can endure through change. Some compound material objects seem like they could even survive the losses and gains of parts, or replacements of parts, right? Again, like we were talking about, your friend may have been an amputee, may have lost a limb. You might be an amputee. I was surfing today at Salt Creek. Oh, it was freezing, first of all. And this dude was surfing, and I looked at his foot. I was like, what has he got on his foot? Like, has he got a flipper on his foot? Like, that's a kook move. But no, like, he was amputated, like one of his legs was amputated, and he was just killing it. And I was like, dang, man, I can't surf that good on 2 feet, right? That's crazy, man. But so whoever that guy was before, I don't know who he was, but whoever he was before, it seems like he's still the same person after he lost the leg. Now, I know you might say, but are they ever really the same person? But usually when you say something like that, what you mean is something more like they are emotionally different. But you don't mean that they are identically different, right? You wouldn't say like, well, he was Tom before the amputation, but now, who is this guy? I've never seen him before. He's identically the same, numerically identically the same, but of course, people will change emotionally, or obviously, their constitution change. The stuff that makes them up changes. But yeah, it seems like you could survive those kinds of losses of parts. Number 5, 2 material objects cannot exist in the same place at the same time. Now, this is definitely a what would we say? An intuition about physical objects at the macro level. In other words, not at the micro level. Who knows? Weird stuff happens down there, between waves and particles, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But at the very least, when you're talking about, a cup and a cup, right? These 2 things don't seem like they can occupy the same space at the same time. And finally, number 6, and this is a little academic speak, necessarily it's the case that identity is a transitive relation. What does identity as a transitive relation mean? It means when if A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, right? So if Bill is the same person as Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Johnson is the same person as your teacher, then Bill is the same person as your teacher. And necessarily that's the case, right? In other words, like, it's not just possibly it would be the case, but it has to always be the case that if one thing is identical to a second, and that second thing is identical to a third, then the first and the third things are identical. Those things all seem to be true for everybody about compound material objects. The third and the fifth, so the idea that compound material objects endure through time and change, and the idea that 2 material objects can be in the same place at the same time, seem to be shared by all material objects, compound or simple, right? I just said compound material objects. Yeah, sorry. Well, it seems like all material objects share those things. Number 4, some compound material objects can survive some losses, gains, and replacements of parts. That seems to be shared only by compound material objects. In other words, if you were a simple material object, if there was only one part to your thing, to whatever that thing is, then of course you couldn't survive the loss of a part, because then it would just be a totally new thing, right? You would have to have parts in order to be able to survive the gain and the loss of parts. if you're a mereologist, if you think that, if you're looking at like what makes up a whole, some people will claim that the whole is a part, but it's an improper part. But when we say proper parts, we mean stuff like your arm and your leg. When I say an improper part, I mean like me, the whole thing. That's one of the improper parts. Yeah, granted that, but we're talking about proper parts here. Necessarily, identity is a transitive relation. Number 6, that we could say is a logical intuition, right? In order to even get out the door of reasoning, we have to believe that one thing is identical to a second. It must be identical to and the second is identical to a third. The first must be identical to the third. And 1 and 2, that is number 1, that there are compound material objects, and number 2, that there are many, many kinds. That seems to be a common sense intuition. What do I mean by that? I mean something like, I don't mean like, well, it's just common sense. What I mean is like, that's just what, like when you look out at the world, that's the way the world seems to be without like going through any theory or anything like that. So it seems like that when we look at the world that there are compound material objects, and that there are many kinds of them.